LPT 2011-113, the Public Bike Share Feasibility Study. If administration could come forward, please. Good morning. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Good morning. I'm Bruce McDougall with Transportation Planning.
And Don Mulligan, Director, Transportation Planning.
Now we have a very lengthy, comprehensive report in our agenda today, and which we've all read, line by line. And so, are there any highlights that you would like to make with regards to the program?
I have a approximately 10-minute presentation, PowerPoint presentation, that might help remind everyone of all of those pieces of information since we've been delayed by a month that might help.
Okay. Committee, do you want to hear that 10-minute overview? Okay. Please proceed.
I'm here to respond to Council's direction to present information related to public bike share in terms of financial benefits, non-financial benefits, revenues, costs, and experiences in other cities. We have a five-step program, we believe, to this being the first step to report to you, followed by another step identifying a business model and a funding strategy for public bike share, then securing funding as the last step with Council's approval, and then a mobilizing and launching stage. Bike share is a mobility option for trips too far to walk and not long enough to justify waiting for transit or too costly for taxi or private vehicle. It's also a network of bicycles placed at key locations in a defined geographic area. And it is a user pay system. In 2010, there were approximately 300 public bike share systems in the world, and in 2011, there were approximately 450. So there are significant benefits and varied benefits to bike sharing. Financial, it's the least expensive after walking transportation option that we have. It has positive impacts for tourism and creates green jobs. And the reduction in sedentary lifestyle diseases associated with inactivity have been well reported as a health benefit through cycling and bike sharing. One of the key benefits is environmental. In North America, through North American research, 25% of bike share trips replace vehicle trips, and it is nearly a carbon neutral means of transportation. It also reduces reliance on private automobiles, it increases mobility options, it encourages cycling, and it reduces the barriers to cycling because there's no need to own, store, or repair your own. In terms of safety, these bikes are specifically designed with safety in mind, and the bikes are all well maintained through the system itself. And it's been shown that where an increase in cycling occurs, the reduction in overall crash rates also occurs. So where does Calgary fit into kind of the variables that we look at to see how well we're prepared? The cycling infrastructure in the center city is probably not as strong as we would like it to be, but through council we've had plans and funding for increased infrastructure in downtown. With the remaining variables, we seem to be quite well positioned. I won't read them all. So where are we talking about? The most suitable area for a public bike share system in Calgary is essentially the center city, as identified in this slide with the ring. And a conceptual station spacing is shown in this slide that will accommodate 400 bicycles, 40 stations, and 760 docks that would be spaced approximately 300 to 400 meters apart. 300 to 400 meters apart is probably 1.5 to 2.5 minute walk. So, revenues. User-generated revenues. Access fees are charged for use of these public bike shares, public bikes. Anybody who is going to use a bike must pay a fee to register to use it. Then there are usage fees, and these fees come after an individual exceeds the free ride period, typically approximately 15 to 45 minutes, depending on whose system we look at. And just as an estimate, we see just over $4 million to be generated through these revenues in a 5-year period. Other sources of revenue are sponsorships, and this system sponsorship, we use an example of a shared sponsorship. Boston, approximately $1 million for 5 years is what we think we would be inclined to get without being overly optimistic. I think the sample exclusive sponsorship of Barclays in the UK at $40 million for 5 years, I don't think has been repeated, and I'm not suggesting that we'll find those dollars. Additional revenues come through station sponsorship. In here you can see the Boston station being sponsored. You can see in Boston the TD Garden Legends Way. We see this as probably being able to develop about $2 million for 5 years. Then there are additional advertising revenues. I just present this slide of an advertising sign that's on one of the stations in Montreal. We have no estimated income for that. That is in part to do with what our next step would be. And that's looking at what business model is totally appropriate for the city of Calgary. Here we have 7 models. It's not exclusively 7 models, but there are 7 models that are in use, and what we see is the need to identify what model would be best for Calgary in the next step, and to find a funding strategy. So what we would like to do today is have you direct administration to return to the SPC on transportation and transit with a business model and funding strategy by 2012. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is, he's standing beside me, so he's not speaking. Alderman Hodges on the bike share program.
Yeah, I just wondered if you wanted to hear from the public first, Madam Chair, or and hold questions till later, or no?
That's a very good idea. Thank you.
Because I'm sure there are public.
How many are here from the public to speak to this? 1, 2, 3. Please, all come forward. We have 4 speakers here. 4 microphones, I'm sorry.
And Madam Chair, just to add, I received a letter by email yesterday from Bike Calgary.
Yes.
And I gave copies to Madam Clerk to attach to the agenda.
Excellent.
Because I see the author is not here this morning. So I thought we can, you are here. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Sir, would you please introduce yourself? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
And your microphone's on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is Gary Webster. I lost my daughter to a bicycle accident, and the concern that I have with regard to the entire bike situation here in the city of Calgary is that there doesn't seem to be enough education that's going towards the bike riders, to the pedestrians that are going to come in contact with bicyclists, and particularly to the drivers of vehicles that have the opportunity to cause serious injury or death to the riders. I have just some comments as well with regard to the slides that were put forward. The safety comments that were put forward only focused on the bike safety. It didn't talk about anything with regard to educating the riders or vehicle drivers. I also was concerned that This is being sponsored by the city. If there was sufficient value seen by individuals within the city, they would support a publicly or privately run opportunity. Access and usage fees for the participants were not mentioned in the presentation, so it's difficult to assess the validity of that $4 million a year in revenue. Those are my comments. I've just recently got involved in this, and so I appreciate the opportunity to make my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and our sympathies for your family. So I have a number of lights on that I'm just going to go through to see if they have questions for you. Alderman Pincott?
And just so when you talk about education, I couldn't agree. Actually, I think that this is something that we all we need to rate across the board. But so you're basically saying that as we look at implementing. And I'll take it broader, not just if we go to a bike share program, but our bike strategy.
Yes.
That you feel there needs to be an education component for the broader public, particularly the drivers.
Yes.
Okay. That the success is dependent on that.
Yeah. The way the 10th Street Northwest bike lanes, which I think are a great idea, were put forward. Just to me, it seemed like, well, a bit of a disaster, really, that it wasn't better advertised and well understood by the drivers.
All right. Okay. Good. Well, and I have to say I couldn't agree with you more, and that point is taken. And as we go through the rolling out implementing the bike strategy over the next number of years, that's definitely something I'm going to be looking for. I just want to clarify that. As we saw in the presentation on the bike share, there is no business model that's being proposed. They're asking basically committee to endorse going out and looking at if the private sector does do it, what it would look like, what would all of that be done. I mean, this is a report to say bike share is a part of the bike strategy, and let's go forward to look at what one of the 7 or variations of the 7 business models could be. So some of your questions that you feel that you would like to comment on, that work hasn't been done yet. They're actually looking for approval to even look at that at this point.
Are there any data that would show the number of bikes per capita in these other communities compared to Calgary? Because my sense is that you might get some tourists that would come to town and want to rent a bike, but unless we're comparing apples with apples, I'm not sure that information, it certainly wasn't available to us today.
And again, I'll just comment on that briefly, and at this point, and I won't do it again, just that bike share systems are available elsewhere, and having been a tourist in a town that has them, tourist usage is something which is another part of how they get used. So,
and I've done the same.
Yeah, no question. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for your comments and for underlining to me what, not just in this issue, but in the broader issue, that education, and not just education of cyclists, because we do seem to focus on that, as you said, but education of everybody on how to share the road is key.
Thank you. And just to go through the lights again, questions for our speaker, Alderman Lowe?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Could I summarize your comments in saying that you feel bike share at this moment, or I guess the conclusion I'm getting from what you said is bike share at this moment or this point in time is premature, that we really should establish the routes and a citizen education program and learn how to deal with that before we move forward?
Well, Calgary has a very extensive bike path system. It doesn't necessarily have, and will have more because of the Calgary Parks Foundation ring road facility that's being planned and built. So my sense is that I don't know what the volume of people are that's going to do this. I guess my concern is that if the private sector can't do it, I don't think the city should subsidize it or get involved in developing it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Lowe. Alderman Dumont, do you have questions? He's missing? He's missing. Alderman Hodges, do you have questions for our presenter?
I agree with the presenter, but I have no questions.
Okay. Sir, thank you very much for coming forward. And you can probably play a unique role in helping us on a go-forward basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could the other speakers come forward and take a microphone, please, so we can be as efficient as possible? Sir, please introduce yourself. And I would recognize Alderman Farrell as declaring an interest in this item and the following one. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to ask if anyone here doesn't have a copy of the By Calgary letter that was sent out yesterday. I have additional copies here.
The city clerk will get extra copies if you have them, and we'll include it with the presentation going forward to council.
That's the one I distributed, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Thank
It
you.
was distributed to everyone.
Okay, your timer's on, sir.
Thank you. By Calgary and the By Calgary Advocacy Committee supports implementation of a public bike share program in Calgary, provided safe, functional, and efficient center city bicycle infrastructure, as described in the joint By Calgary CPAC letter to administration on December 19th of 2011, precedes the mobilization phase of the bike share program. As such, we support the recommendation to direct administration to return by June of 2012 with a business model and funding strategy for the bike share program, with the understanding that staff and financial resources will not be diverted from the implementation of or maintenance of bicycle infrastructure. Through approval and funding of the cycling strategy, Council demonstrated its commitment to providing Calgarians with better access to sustainable transportation options, so that the 59% of Calgarians who want to cycle more often have the opportunity to do so. Approval to investigate the operation and funding of a bike share program is a step further in this direction and reinforces Council's commitment to increase bicycle mode share. By Calgary sees a bike share program as offering the following benefits. It provides an efficient and cost-effective transportation option for Calgarians and visitors to experience our city. It opens the door for Calgary's interested but concerned population, as identified in this cycling strategy as being the main target, to take up cycling. It is a means to increase cyclist visibility on the road through more Calgarians cycling more often and the inherent safety in numbers that follows. It represents an investment in Calgary's vibrant urban culture, and it is a great complement to Calgary's expanding public transportation network. Ultimately, a bike share program provides the opportunity to increase bicycle mode share with the resultant benefits in improved health, improved road safety, reduced congestion, and personal financial savings. A bike share program is an integral part of Calgary becoming one of the premier cycling cities in North America, as stated in the cycling strategy as being the main vision. By Calgary stresses our belief that well-planned and constructed bicycle infrastructure, accompanied by a comprehensive education and promotion campaign, is the foundation for a safe and successful bike share program. If limitations to financial or staff resources prevent such infrastructure and promotions from being in place prior to bike share mobilization, By Calgary recommends Council delay the bike share program until the conditions are right to ensure success. Finally, By Calgary recognizes the hard work and dedication of administration to make Calgary a more bicycle-friendly city and thanks Council for its direction to ensure Calgarians have access to sustainable transportation options. So this letter was signed by the directors of By Calgary, the Elbow Valley Cycling Club, the Good Life Community Bike Shop, Two Wheel View, the Bike Group Campus, Bicycle Society of Calgary, and Sustainable Alberta Commuter Challenge. Thank you.
Your name?
Simon Jouvet.
Easy
Simon.
for you to say.
Yes. Simon, you can say that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Good presentation, and we have some questions for you.
Yes.
We have Alderman Hodges. No thanks. Okay.
I've read the letter, I saw.
And next we have Alderman Chabot.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Simon, what's your last name again?
Chauvet. Chauvette, Chauvette.
Chauvette. Okay, thanks. So there's been some suggestion by a previous presenter that we may not necessarily have the infrastructure in place right now to maximize on this opportunity. What are your thoughts on that?
So the opinion of Bike Calgary on this is that indeed right now the infrastructure, the transportation cycling infrastructure is not appropriate in the center city. However, in the cycling strategy, it is a priority to build infrastructure in the center city, and we believe that before, if everything goes according to plan, and that's very important, we believe that the infrastructure will be appropriate by the time the bike share program gets rolled out.
Assuming the bike share program gets rolled out in 2014.
Yes.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Si, Simon.
Thank you. Alderman Carra.
Well, largely asked and answered, but I really appreciate Bike Calgary coming together and making that statement. And just so we're very clear. I mean, everyone loves the idea of bike share.
Yeah.
But what is most important is that we have dedicated cycle infrastructure before we start putting people onto bike share and sending them out willy-nilly into the streets. Thank you very much.
And, I just want to emphasize, so there's infrastructure and then there's education promotion to just get back to the first presentation, the concerns of the first presenter. And as well, so we want to make sure that this is not, so this will not divert funds from the other elements of the cycling strategy. Those are our main concerns. But overall, we love the bike share idea. We think it's great. We've seen it work in other cities. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Alderman Pincott.
Well, thank you. And yeah, asked and answered as well. I just want to follow up on the education point because I see Mr. Hollingshead's signature on here. And Bike Calgary, and I know that Don has been working a lot around education, around the education component and educating cyclists and hopefully drivers in that urban environment. Is Bike Calgary doing any work or anticipating doing any work around getting out for broader education? As an advocacy group, have you guys discussed that at all?
To my knowledge, we haven't. I know the bike, the regular courses that you mentioned, offered by Don from the Elbow Valley Cycling Club, will be back this year.
Okay.
I don't know of other programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that Bike Calgary's voice would be a good voice and an important voice around education as well.
Thank you.
Anyway, and thank you for all the work
We
that
definitely consider that the main issue here is that we're a volunteer-run organization. We're definitely looking at other ways to get our message out to the public.
That's great. Thank you, and thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you. Alderman Farrell.
Thank you for coming down today and your work in bringing a number of disparate groups together. I've been reading about bike share and how it helps introduce people into cycling. One of the tweets that I read was that it was the entry drug into cycling. And so do you have any information, have you done any reading about how a bike share fits with a cycling strategy and the proper timing of implementing a bike share?
To my knowledge, so I think the timing that's mentioned that the administration is looking at is reasonable. We think that within 2 years, if everything goes according to plan, if bike infrastructure will be built in the city, we think that 2 years is a reasonable amount of time. And to address what you said about cycling being the entry drug, bike share being the entry drug into cycling, I've definitely seen it myself. I lived 5 years in Montreal, and I was there when they introduced the Big C, the bike share program there. And a lot of my friends who never biked or never thought of biking started cycling just for short trips, and then eventually they got more into it, and they became full-time year-round cyclists. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And Alderman Keating?
Thank you, Chair. Let me start off by saying that I'm a firm believer that statistics can be used for whatever purpose. And so I'm going to give you a statistic that could be used for whatever purpose, and we can counteract those. So never really want to take them in isolation, but they all fit together, I suppose, at some point in time in some way. I'm referring to a study which was done by McGill University, which is titled The Much Anticipated Marriage of Cycling and Transit, and How Will They Work? Are you aware of that study at all, or?
I have read the study, but I don't have a deep knowledge about it, so I don't think. Yeah, but go on with your question.
Yeah, I'm going through it just to and the focus of this study was how is in this case Bixby, because it is Montreal, how is it going to work with regular transit? And if we're talking about multimodal aspects of a trip to make it effective, they actually came through with statistics that may be different than what we heard earlier, but maybe in a different scenario, and I'm willing to accept that as well. But they basically state that 28% of the Bixby users just replace using their regular bike. And then they state that 25% of Bixby users just replace walking. And then they state that 13% replace a transit. Mm-hmm. So if I added all of those together, the vast majority would have nothing to do with other vehicles. And then they go on to say that 8% replace a taxi trip, 2% replace a car trip, and 4% add a trip which was not otherwise made because of the success of the Bixby. So if we're looking at bike share as a way of reducing congestion on our roads, I'm not sure this study done by a master's student, a research fellow, and an assistant professor really states that we're going to fulfill that possibility. So we have to look at, in my view, bike share is, I guess, in isolation, whether it's a tourist or whether it's just meant for a local area to use it. They actually go on and say that if it's to work, it's actually going to have to be outside of the core and 15 kilometers away from the center to make it really work effectively in trying to get the vehicles off the road. So I think I'm just asking for your opinion whether or not you would think that bike share should be looked at as a tourist attraction or as a way for people within a congested area be able to use the bikes on an ongoing basis.
So I'll speak on my own behalf. I'm not, because we haven't really discussed this study by Calgary, but from my experience in Montreal, so I think the study was made in the earlier stages of Bixby, I think in 2010, is that right?
It has a date on it, January 11, but obviously it was done before that.
Yeah. I think it was done in 2010, don't quote me on that. And that was not very long after Bixby was implemented, Bixby started, and I think people were not, the first people to adopt it were not necessarily the target market. So I think we have to recognize that those things take a certain time. And now I know this year in Montreal, Bixby had actually had problems because the demand was too high, and they're planning on expanding their network. And I think what you mentioned is a very good idea, and they're definitely looking at it. I think it's good to start with high density, high use areas, but it's definitely possible to expand it further. Now, I used to live about 8 kilometers from downtown Montreal, and we had a Bixby station that went even 1 kilometer east of there, and I think so. Yeah, I think that was done. That was just done in the earlier stages, and since then the demand has grown tremendously, and I think so. Yeah, I think we have to recognize it's a long-term process, but it definitely has tangible benefits.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, and this study in isolation would be, in my view, rather useless because it only talks about one little thing. My concern is not with the bike share program at all. My concern is it going to actually reduce congestion as far as vehicles, or is it going to be regular cyclers, or are we going to expand into different users? And whether or not the city is going to have funding it on an ongoing basis. So,
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay.
So again, on a personal, at a personal level, I think I've used Big C 3 times when I was in Montreal. The reason being that I have my own bike and I fit more in the enthusiastic or fearless, if you want to call it, cyclist category. So I'm not the target market for bike share for Big C. However, the people, I think, like, as a tourist, I've definitely used it. When I went back to Montreal, I definitely used it, and I saw a lot of people there, a lot of tourists trying to figure out how that was working. So a lot of tourists using it, hopefully, and another benefit of Big C, apart from being that entry drug, as Alderman Farrell mentioned, it's also, people who use the Big C normally, it's a big bike. It's not something you can go really fast with. So the way motorists normally perceive Big C rider is not really like they're cyclists. They're more like pedestrians on a bike. So they tend to treat them differently. They tend to slow down, and that, I think, overall increases their awareness to cyclists, and that increases
That's good.
cyclist safety.
The question.
Thank you.
One more question. Do you have to wear a helmet in Montreal?
No, you don't.
Okay. Slightly different, but thank you.
No further questions. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself, please.
Boss, if you want to get some help with that. Could we get some help with getting a laptop presentation on?
Are you all together?
Yes.
You're making a joint presentation? 5 minutes? Okay. Sounds good. Okay, why don't we just start, and we'll work. We'll keep working on the technology for you. My apologies. Please begin.
Hello, my name is Mahsa Dokani, and I would like to introduce the representative of the Calgary Tour de Nuit Society. Christina Roberts is a Bachelor of Commerce candidate who is graduating from the Haskins School of Business with a major in marketing and a minor in communications studies. She has an interest in environmental sustainability, behavioral change, and social impact marketing. She also previously developed a feasibility analysis on bike share in Vancouver for an entrepreneurship class. Gary Beaton has an economic degree from Queen's University at Kingston. After a career with the City of Toronto, he completed an MBA at the Richard Ivey School of Business. He has served by appointment to the Medical Review Committee of the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and then positioned a Canadian software firm for explosive growth in a deregulating Australian market. He was involved with the first corporate social responsibility policy initiative at the Canadian University. My background is business. I have Bachelor of Commerce degree and MBA degree from Paymanur University. I'm a master's candidate in sustainable energy development. Christina and I are 2 of the interns, and we are working on projects in order to improve and promote sustainable transportation. As business majors, we have serious concerns about the business plan that administration claims will promote the more people cycling more often. Report LPT 20011-63 directed administration to prepare a business case analysis of bike share. However, the Alta planning study is not a business plan. So what's the business plan and how does one complete a business case analysis? As we know, each business plan is developed by having framework of key components. It is the role of the business consultant to use his or her judgment to tweak the framework according to whether the business decision is, for example, primarily a finance case or marketing case. This slide can show some of the key elements in business plan and what the consultant should be considering in arriving at a business decision, such as executive summary, corporate mission, and for financial key elements, such as financial statement, also market key elements, and operation. Also, there is some analysis such as comparative analysis, SWOT analysis, and also there is a methodology for completing a business case analysis. In this methodology, there are several steps, including investing and analyze the business history and growth, identify strengths and weaknesses within the business, gather information on external environment, analyze finding, identify corporate level strategy, identify business level strategy, analyze implementation, and make recommendation. So, just this very quick review of the components of a business plan suggests a few areas where there should have been some data collection and analysis. There is a comparative analysis in car sharing. Actually, in 2005, there were 25 members, and now there are only 150 members. Calgary. So let me talk about the marketing plan. If a compelling case for public bike share has been made by Alta Planning, then we would turn our attention to the marketing plan. An effective marketing strategy is essential to encourage more people to cycle more often. Marketing can perform public awareness and also increase demand before system is launched. So there are 5 steps for effective marketing strategies, such as identify the desired behavior, identify barriers, design the program, pilot the program, and evaluate and improve the program. Now, Christina talk about the epistemological shortcomings and factual challenges we have discovered in the Alta Planning business plan.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Christina Robert. So the plan that Alta Planning and Design put out should have addressed how to best achieve our objective to make our transportation system more efficient by encouraging more people cycling more often. And we wanted to achieve this objective by being careful to spend taxpayer dollars only in the most effective way possible. Public bike share is a tool and part of a transportation portfolio that will give us an optimal risk and reward outcome only if we get it right. So the transportation department was to prepare a business case analysis of bike share that would assess if this is a viable solution to achieve the objective at hand. It is ironic that the report raises the issue of corporate social responsibility, since it would have been socially responsible for Alta Planning, Design, and Administration to acknowledge that this was a less than arm's length consultant. Extra care should have been taken to produce a neutral and comprehensive business plan. The Alta Planning Report failed to address all of the constraints for these systems, which has been outlined by Transport Canada. There are 7 of these main considerations provided in their guide from March 2009. Calgary only satisfies 2 of these criteria, which are the size of the city and the potential for intermodality with the transit system. Of the other 5 criteria, 4 are questionable or affected by self-reporting bias, so topography, climate, level of bicycle use, and population density. And it can be said with certainty that Calgary fails to meet the key safety criteria for roads and bicycle facilities. Transport Canada identified the perception of danger as one of the key barriers to bicycle use, and the extent and quality of bicycle infrastructure affects this perception. So right now, Calgary currently does not have basic northwest or east-west spines or connected network, and the area proposed for bike share is divided by physical barriers, being the Bow River and the railroad tracks. And to quote Transport Canada, poorly interconnected car-oriented networks limit the success of a public bicycle system. Commuter cyclists proposed an improved network to the city in 1977. So also, traditional business case analysis would have laid out key decision criteria that would affect the city's decision to pursue this opportunity. In addition to whether proper infrastructure exists, exit strategy, city image, profitability, and strategic objectives should have been taken into consideration. The report states, if the city was to determine that PBS was inappropriate for Calgary, the financial loss to the city could be mitigated through the sale of assets associated with the system. This is an unrealistic exit strategy, as the sale of assets would hardly compensate for the initial investment, and only a small percentage of costs would be recovered. The report also failed to mention the helmet issue. The Alberta bylaw states that only cyclists under 18 are required to wear a helmet. However, we know that perception of risk is one of the main barriers to bicycle use. So since helmets won't be conveniently available, the system may be viewed as unsafe, and this is not in alignment with an image the city should project. In terms of profitability, these systems usually cannot operate as self-funding enterprises, especially since they give the first half hour of a ride for free, and it is determined that the practical use, a range of use is 5 kilometers. That means no revenue would be generated most of the time. Bicycle sharing depends on funding from public sources, and the city might not be in a position to support the investment. So the final issue is whether the system achieves the strategic objective of getting more people out of cars and onto bikes. And the ELDA planning report claims that 25% of trips replace a vehicle trip, but as mentioned, that McGill University study had different statistics claiming that bike share did little to take cars off the roads and does little to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why the Calgary Tour de Nuit Society has the opinion that providing a network of dedicated bicycle infrastructure should be the city's first priority in encouraging more people to cycle more often. This is the view of other cyclists in the community and of past generations of commuter cyclists.
Just to wrap up.
Okay. So basically, more research should go into the demand for infrastructure should be responded to, and then more research should go into establishing whether Calgary meets these criteria.
Thank you. Alderman Hodges, do you have questions for the presenter?
Yes, I just wonder if the presenter has a copy of the presentation that she can make available to the committee.
Both would be helpful. So if you don't have them today, you can make them available to the city clerk. She'll give you her business card. You can email them in.
You can email them in, and then we can get a copy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Alderman Lowe, did you have questions?
Summarize both of your presentations in 34 seconds. Whoops, sorry.
Sure.
It's on, isn't it? Yeah, it is on. Summarize both your presentations in 15 seconds or less. It's bike share's a good idea, but only after you've established the infrastructure and designed the program appropriately to the city in which it's going to serve.
Right.
So we're premature.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
My name's
Introduce yourself, please, sir. Again.
My name's Gary Beaton, and I'm the president of the Calgary Tour de Nuit Society. A few minutes ago, I heard administration describe the target market for Calgary bike share, and there were, I guess, 3 people. Some people who find it too far to walk, people who can't afford a cab, and people with an issue about how long it takes to wait for a bus. That sounds like we should be able to ride our bikes around downtown and see stranded people who can't get anywhere because there is no bike share program. And of course, that's not the case. Bike share has become a bit of a phenomenon in the last few years, and part of the phenomenon is the fact that it's being regarded as the holy grail when it comes to changing human behavior. All of us make New Year's resolutions, and all of us don't keep them. And there may be one or two on the front table that may want to tell us that they do keep their New Year's resolutions, and if that's the case, please tell us the secret. Because getting people to get out of their cars and onto a bike in all sorts of weather is not an easy task. It's phenomenally complicated. It involves extremely sophisticated marketing. It involves a lot of money. And some people can do it. Some people are doing it very well. But to treat bike share as the holy grail may not be where we want to start the process. So we have asked a few people for their opinions on bike share. We have a member who's a financial analyst. We have another member who owns a supply company in the bike industry. I'll submit you those letters. We also asked a mid-market bank manager if he'd give us the money based on the Alta planning report. The answer was no. So we have a number of financial issues. We also did a sensitivity analysis, which was the backdrop on the presentation, and the risks are underestimated in the Alta planning report. This is a positive, flowery, very mellow-sounding musical interpretation of the risks that are involved for a municipality when it comes to implementing bike share. We believe the membership numbers are estimated way too high. The residual revenue from extended periods are not borne out if there'd been adequate research into this. The owner of the one bike rental company in downtown Calgary, which will not be in business if bike share is implemented, stated that 95% of his customers are tourists and that none of them can ride a bike for more than 60 minutes. It's physically impossible. And of course that will basically wipe out all your long-term rental revenue streams from this program. So what alternatives do we have? We have to go back to the basics, and we need an infrastructure system that makes it safe for people who currently ride their bikes. Because the people who are currently riding their bikes you will find nobody else with a cheaper transportation system in this city, and I can always take you out to my bike, which is parked 5 meters from the front door of this building, and nobody operates a bike cheaper than that one. The price, the estimated subsidy rate for a Bixie bike is $6,000 to $8,000, and we know that from Melbourne because Alta Planning's implementation of bike share in Melbourne, Australia, has not been successful at all. That was the one case that should have gone into this report, because you've heard me address council before saying that if there's one city in the world that's like Calgary when it comes to bikes, it's Melbourne, Australia. And Melbourne, Australia has the world's largest advocacy organization, which is, albeit a statewide, has 45,000 members, paying one of the highest membership fees in the world.
Coming up, Gary.
Thank you.
Wrap up.
So we have yet a lot to learn before we seriously looking at bike share any more than we have. In fact, what I would argue is that in the last 3 years we've squandered a huge opportunity to put cycling infrastructure into the downtown core. We had a process that was suspended in December, which was incomplete. There was supposed to be a stakeholder engagement process. That process needs to be reinstituted subject to the guidelines of the engagement policy. So what I would like to distribute to the members of the Transportation and Transit Committee is our recommended amendment to the motion that is before you today to get the cycling project back on track. Thank you.
You could read it out, please, and Madam Clerk will pick up the copies for circulation to the committee. If you could read it, please.
And I'm not sure if this is the correct form you would want. Whereas Calgary Bike Share Feasibility Study was contracted by administration to a bike share system vendor and marketing agent that is neither unbiased nor operating at arm's length, whereas public bike share was not a recommendation of the community.
You don't need all the whereases, Gary, just what you're asking for.
Okay. That the SPC on Transportation and Transit not receive this report for information, and that Administration Recommendation 2 contained in Report LPT 2036 be amended. Direct administration to see further allocation of staff time and expenditures on research and assessment of public bike share until 1, it has received affirmative direction from both the two key stakeholders in the commuter cycling community, the Commuter Cycling by Calgary Association and the Calgary Tour de Nuit Society. 2, the matter is assessed and approved by the Calgary Pathway and Bikeway Advisory Committee. 3, the cycle community engagement to redraft downtown cycle route network, which was terminated on December 8th, 2011 by administration, is resumed and a collaboration exercise is completed in compliance with the relevant section of the City of Calgary Engage policy.
How many more pages do you have there?
Just one. One item. It may read like a page, but dedicated bicycle infrastructure is installed in the central business district, including separated bike lanes that allow for the safe operation of a bicycle by individuals with various ranges of risk tolerance, which would be determined by a research survey conducted by an accredited registered
Thank you.
practicing psychologist.
Thank you very much for your presentations. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address the committee? Thank you for coming forward today. I appreciate your input.
Excuse me, Chair? I did have my leg. Okay, thank you. I'm aware of, and I may be wrong on these, but that there have been a couple municipalities that have implemented a bike share or a study or the possibility, and I think that's New York and Toronto. I'm not sure about Toronto, but I think I'm accurate with New York, where they have gone ahead and said, yeah, let's do it, but absolutely no municipal funding will go to this program. Are you aware of those, or?
To some degree, yes, I am.
Are those the two that I'm correct in, or not?
Yeah, Toronto's one of them, yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong on New York then. So, looking at the financial analysis and all of that, is there any bike share program out there at the moment that is fiscally responsible and actually pays for the complete costs? That's capital costs in operation on an ongoing basis.
Well, there's an economies of scale issue here, and one of the arguments is that when you're in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 bikes, and of course we're only dealing with 400 in Calgary, that the system will be operating at a different level of financial parameters. So it might be possible in the case of London, England, that it is operating on a neutral mode as far as the taxpayer goes.
So the size is important, and maybe
critical.
Geographic area is important, and all of those. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming forward. Alderman Lowe?
Madam Chair, I'll lift from the table the Northwest Truck Review report. And
You can stand down, please. So we're tabling this item that we're on.
lift from the table the other one, and we'll
Right.
deal with the amendments.
Madam
For
Chair.
those members of the committee that are here, that it just added, we have two amendments to deal with that weren't written. So we tabled the previous item, and we're lifting from the table that item so that administration can leave and not have to spend the rest of their time here.
Madam Chair, we've got a number of members of the public who've been sitting through this item. I think, are there members
This
of the
won't
public?
take long. These are just minor amendments. Alderman Farrell.
I think it was almost a 2-hour item this morning. I didn't think it would take long either.
All those in favor?
Agreed.
Opposed? That's carried. Call the roll. How many were opposed? 3? Okay, call the roll, Madam Clerk. Sorry, committee. Yes.
On the motion to table the bike report, Alderman Carra?
Yes.
Alderman Chabot?
Yes.
Alderman Demong?
No.
Alderman Farrell? Alderman Hodges?
Yes.
Alderman Jones? Alderman Keating? Alderman Lowe?
Yes.
Alderman Pincott? Alderman Colley-Urquhart?
Yes.
That's carried.
Madam Chairman, can I ask a question on a point of order?
As long as it's a point of order.
On a point of order, on a tabling motion, Are all members entitled to vote, or just committee members?
Yes, they declared an interest, so they can vote.
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, and I answered. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're tabling that item, and we're lifting from the table the previous item, and we have 2 amendments. Madam Clerk, if you could put those up, please. That way you guys can get out of here. Okay, Alderman Lowe, if you'd like to introduce your amendments, please.
Yeah, it's, as I said earlier, Madam Chair, I have no difficulty with recommendation number 1, but I would refer recommendation number 2, which is actually the next amendment, and Madam Clerk had them
Do you want
from...
the other one first? Yeah. It's coming.
And add a new item, which is actually the second one up there. So this is to refer recommendation number 2 to administration for
the other
further
window.
consultation with the affected communities.
Sorry.
There we are. With the affected communities and the stakeholders with a view to mitigating the effects of aggregate haulage through the Country Hills Boulevard, 85th Street, Royal Birch Boulevard intersection, including but not limited to optimization of the proposed signal management system, which we understand is in place but not been turned on yet. Development of a proposed, it's supposed to be resource haul route, and limiting the use of Country Hills Boulevard, 85th Street, Royal Birch. And by that, what I'm meaning is if we were to limit it to bona fide westbound hauls only, I suspect that would take a significant load out of that intersection. And so that's the first one. And Madam Clerk, if you could put the other one up. Oh, to return to committee, and I guess, Mr. Logan, I was looking for a date when you felt we could do this.
Correct the wording first, and the first one, please.
To return to committee in May, 2012 May.
We're just correcting the wording in this one. It's resource hall, right?
Resource haul route, yeah.
Under B. Can we correct that?
Just, yeah, it is. It's resource.
To return to committee by 2012 May, or not later than 2012 May.
Can you do it, please?
So to return to committee.
That's good.
Next one. Other amendment, please. Okay. On that amendment, are you ready for the question? Okay, I have a lot of lights on, so let's deal with that one first. Thanks, Alderman Jones, for that. Our first question on this is Alderman Carra.
A question, I guess, for Mr. Logan. What would the effect of referring number 2? It would still function as a bike. I mean, as a truck route in the interim.
Not a bike route.
Yeah. This isn't about bike routes. Royal Oak isn't upset about bikes
probably would
double
like
turning.
it.
There would be no change for the time being.
Okay. That's, I guess, my question, and I'll ask the chairwoman to call these separately.
I shall. Thank you. Alderman Chabot?
Probably also for Mr. Logan. If it comes back in May, would that give you an adequate time to assess the optimization of the signaling and the improvements there too?
Yes, I believe so. If we get it in operation in the next couple of weeks, yes.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Alderman Jones?
Isn't going on. There it is. On C, I know what it means, but it doesn't say what it means. Limiting the use of Country Hills Boulevard 85th. It doesn't say to westbound traffic only, and it doesn't say to westbound truck traffic only. So in the close, I'd like to know exactly what it means as opposed to what it says there, because that tells me all traffic would be limited use, whether it's eastbound or westbound, and that's not what the explanation said. So I'd like a clarification on C in the close.
Okay. Alderman Lowe, do you want to make any further clarification before you close?
Before I close? Well, it actually it would be look better limiting the intent, Alderman Jones, is to limit the use of that intersection to gravel haul routes that are actually proceeding westbound.
Then it should say that.
It should say that. You find some language for me that I think is clearly understood by administration.
Boulevard to westbound truck traffic only.
Are you working on C?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Okay, that's good. And
Westbound truck traffic. not
westbound gravel haulage. That's good.
that's good. Excellent. Is that okay, Alderman
fine.
Jones? Okay, so committee, on that amendment to the amendment, to speak to that, Alderman Keating.
No, you're asking my question.
On the amendment to the amendment, are there any further questions on it? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. On the amendment, Alderman Keating.
Mic doesn't work. Oh, there we go. The question for administration and maybe in the close. If we look at number 2, there are 4 bullets, and we address the first bullet here. I would just like to know how the bottom 3 are related to the top 1, or whether or not we shouldn't be eliminating the bottom 3.
It's okay. It's okay.
Working. Through the chair, I think the question is related to the 3 sections, Country Hills Boulevard, John Laurie Boulevard, Shaginappy Trail. Is that what you're referring to? So those 3 portions of road would not be identified in this proposed wording.
Well, this says refer number 2, does it not? So they would be included. It would be referring all of them, all 4 of those sections. So I'm asking, I guess, and it can be in the close and yourself, how do the bottom 3 relate to the top 1? Because that's, or are we looking at mitigating all 4 of them? And I guess because most of the discussion was the difficulty at the intersection at 112 and 85th. So if they're not related, I'm wondering if they should be referred, and if they are related, then I kind of would like to know how.
Administration, can you respond to Alderman Keating's?
Through the chair, I would say that the focus of this is on the intersection of 112th and 85th. Country Hills Boulevard is also part of the truck route.
Yeah.
John Laurie Boulevard and Shaginappy Trail would not be specifically impacted by that, so those 2 for sure could come out. Country Hills Boulevard, though, that the section that goes from from Stony Trail to 12 Mile Coulee Road, that would still be impacted by this.
So if I'm correct, we're seeing that in your opinion that the top 2 are related and the bottom 2 are not related to, because most of the discussion and the concern we talked about today was was the 112th and 85th intersection. And I don't know if the other ones really came up at all, but I could be wrong.
Through the chair, I would agree with that. That's correct.
So, okay, thank you for that. And again, if you can address that in your close, then that'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Keating. To close, Alderman Lowe, on this amendment.
Mike?
Go to the top.
The key words in that are affected communities, and I've had ongoing discussions since I've been in office with Hawkwood, Citadel, the Hamptons, Ranchlands, virtually every community in Northwest Calgary with respect to gravel haulage. So I think I would like that those communities have an opportunity, if they wish, given the amount of truck traffic in some of those segments has changed, but be offered an opportunity to present. So while their conversation, you're quite correct, this morning focused on a very problematic intersection, the issue of gravel haulage and truck routes in Northwest Calgary is pervasive right through Ward 2.
Okay, are you ready for the question? Oh, we're just doing this amendment. Do you want A, B, and C called separately? Is that what you're asking? Okay. On the motion to refer, on A, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. On B, all those in favor?
Agreed.
Opposed? Opposed. Alderman Chabot and Keating opposed. That's carried. And on C, all those in favor? Opposed?
Agreed.
Alderman Chabot, Keating opposed. It's carried. The amendment is carried. And on your other amendment,
And Madam Chair, Mr. Logan gave me some help with this. Administration to explore accelerating the future road network in the area by a preliminary design of connection of 85th Street to Country Hills Boulevard, including an estimate of land required and projection credit costs, construction costs, and be prepare a projection of the area road network performance with the 85th Street connection in place. In other words, if the, I'm going to call it the shortcut by the oil well is built, what would the impact be? So I'd ask you support in that. This is just looking at the next generation.
and you can report back in May on this one as well?
Yeah.
Yes. Any questions on this? Are you ready for questions on the amendment? All those in favor?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I didn't know whether your light was still on from before. Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. I've got a meeting at 1, so I really wanted to ask some questions about bike shares.
We have members of the public from the previous item that were on that had to wait because we had to put this to table these amendments. So
Okay, I
we
didn't
only
hear.
have
Yes, all right, I do
this-
have a question though. Should this not be referred to the tips list? And Mr. Logan? I think we need someone to fix our.
No, it's user error. It's working fine. It's me.
Keep coming back on. The intent here is that one of the potential solutions is to shift the turning movements away from the problem intersection. Towards that, the project is 85th Street. We need to know what it would look like and how much it would cost, and we don't have that information available as yet. So this wouldn't prioritize the project, Board. I think it would
Just to explore it.
give you the information to evaluate how soon we might be able to move that forward. Is it feasible to use the contributions from the aggregate industry to do that?
I'll support it then. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman Farrell. I see no further lights on to speak to this. Are you ready for the question? Do you want them called separately? All together. On the amendment, on the amendment, all those in favor?
Agreed.
Alderman Chabot opposed. That's carried. On the recommendations and motions as amended, all those in favor?
Agreed.
Opposed. Alderman Chabot opposed. That's carried. Thank you. A motion to lift from the table, Alderman Farrell, the previous bike share item. And I'll thank you, administration. You're able to leave now rather than hanging around. Thank you. And so if administration could come forward, please, on our bike share feasibility study. And I have, trying to squeeze in the questions here for Alderman Farrell before she has to leave.
Thanks.
Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. So, gentlemen, thank you for your report. And we heard some criticisms around the rigor of the report. And so I was wondering if you could tell us what your thoughts are on those. Perhaps maybe going into some of the examples of the difference between successful examples and unsuccessful examples, because we have the benefit of learning from both, and what you've learned from both of those examples.
Well, if I may, through the chair, I think the first thing that that came to mind in the discussions, from my perspective, was the percentage of bicycle trips replacing automobile trips. And one of the studies referred to, the McGill study, was done as the gentleman, Simon, I apologize, I don't remember his surname, mentioned. It was done early in Bixie's evolution. But I think what was most important was the report or the thesis work that was done on this was integrating bicycles and transit. And since the number seemed so low in comparison to what we had learned from Minneapolis with 22% or so, Denver 43% or so. That number seemed very low, and so what I did was I went to the original study, and I found out that in the question, one of the initial questions was, if you don't take transit, you're eliminated from the study. So that meant that people who drove cars and used Bixie, but not took transit, they would be eliminated. So it would skew dramatically those results. Now, the purpose of that study was the integration of bicycles and transit, and that is, in that context, quite a reasonable and worthwhile work. But in terms of looking at it as bicycle trips replacing car trips, the bias was in the question, and therefore the answer skewed. And so the other North American results, as high as 43%, kind of make the 25% we report quite accurate, I believe.
Okay, so
And sorry, if I may, just to conclude, 23% of trips Bixie reported were replaced automobile trips according to their ridership.
So the rigor around the business case, you would need to do a business plan, and that's what you're basically asking permission to do. You're providing us what today, then?
So what we're providing is information that we believe gives you the background to say it's worthwhile taking the next step towards investigating what business model and how to secure the funding. This is what we hope to give you today. We hope we've given you today to tell us to move forward to the next step. As I mentioned in this, that we had a 5-step program here.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. So if we decide to go forward today, there's certainly an expectation that there's real rigor behind the numbers and they're achievable, even modest. The Melbourne example, my understanding is they had a helmet law that really impacted the user. Is that what you've heard as well?
Through the chair, that's exactly the situation. Australia has a helmet, a bicycle helmet requirement, and so they're challenged to have cyclists go through the rigor of getting a helmet, putting a helmet on, carrying a helmet, all of those things. Alberta, or we don't have that law. If you're 18 or over, you don't have to wear a helmet, and part of what we would propose in our bicycle share program would be that you would have to be 18 or over to use the bicycle. This isn't unique. This is quite common.
Madam Chair, we're at noon, and
I was just going to recess.
can I ask you a question then, please? If I have a meeting with the North Central leg of the LRT with our MP and some MLAs, and that'll start at 1, is it possible that we could start a bit later? Or do you think the conversation will continue for a little while? So if I had,
Well, first of all, how long is your meeting?
well, I can shorten it to half an hour. It was going to be an hour, but
What we can do is table the item if you wish.
I don't know if committee wants to do that, but if you think there'll be enough questions, I just wanted to be part of this discussion.
Of course, I have 4 more lights on for questions, so we really need to take our break.
Okay.
And we'll try our best to wait for you when you get back.
Yeah, filibuster. Okay, thank you.
So we're recessed till 1 o'clock. Thank you. To order. And where were we, Madam Clerk? I'm kind of...
We were still on the first item.
We passed the amendments. No, we finished with that item.
I'm sorry, we're on the second item.
And we had lifted from the table the bike share program, and I have lights still on, and Alderman Farrell had finished. Alderman Jones is not here, and the next speaker is Alderman Keating. And administration, please come forward.
I wanted to follow up on the 25% that you were talking about, and in some ways, driving and then using a bike share, I think it may reduce congestion to some bit in maybe the downtown core, but I mean, I'm open to the fact that any study is not complete, and it's, I don't want to use the word bias, but it's stinted in one way for sure. But what does the 25% actually mean as far as numbers, or what do they mean that it reduces car trips 25%?
Through the chair, Mike. Through the chair. If we're talking about in the first year an estimated number of approximately 265,000 bicycle trips. 25% of 265,000 is the number of car trips that would be estimated to be reduced. But I also like to be very clear about taking your point about each study is unique and each environment is unique. So these are estimated or round numbers, but we're talking about 25% of 265,000 in year 1.
And if we look at the geographic area of so-called the pilot project, or whatever you want to call it, that would be within that area only.
Through the chair, yes, that's we would say, if you will, in the presentation there was a circle around Center City that pushed out a titch beyond the boundaries, but essentially we're talking Center City trips.
So if we're looking at bike share as a tourist industry, per se, or part of it, in our helmet law, what would that do for families that come to Calgary and want to go for a bike ride?
Well, I think there's 2 kind of trips through the chair that we have the local population, resident population trips, and then there would be the tourist trips. Now, the public bike share is not designed to replace tourism, to replace tourist or bike rental systems set up for tourists. What does happen is tourists do use them, but it would be it would be in our desired operation not to provide for the public bike shares, public bikes to be used in that way. That could be used. Those kind of rides trips could be obtained through a public rental system.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I did say as a courtesy I would table this and do the other item, but I can do that after more questions are done.
Okay.
If we need to for Alderman Farrell. And of course, I do have an amendment when the time is right. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll recognize you. Thank you. Alderman Pincott.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions, but I also would like to, Madam Chair, if I could at the time, and if we are going to table it, then, but if I could be recognized to move the item at the appropriate time.
Do that now.
Okay. I would like to
Get something on the table.
Okay, I would actually like to move it with a change incorporated, and that is to the time.
Mhm.
And I would like to move it with, rather than June, October. I just think, I think realistically, just a little bit more time would be appropriate. So my question is around the infrastructure piece. And, we heard from presentations from the public about the cycling infrastructure that would be required to support a bike share system, whatever that system looks like. But and is our bike strategy and how we're rolling out the implementation of the bike strategy, when do we anticipate having that infrastructure in place that would be able to support a successful bike share system?
Through the chair. To start off, we have to say we agree. The infrastructure is not adequate. In fact, the presentation had a number of checkboxes with all of the things that are considered important for bike share to succeed, and that one was not checked off. So we readily acknowledge that today we don't have the infrastructure for successful bike share. As you know, the timetable as it stands now is to implement it in 2 years from now. We do have a plan that has been approved by council. We have the resources, we have the funding, and we're not starting from square one. We have been working on improving bike lanes in downtown over the last 2 years. So there has been noticeable improvements already from basically zero. So we do believe if everything goes just right, that in 2 years, that's a best case scenario, I would suggest, that we would be ready for bike share. If things go off the rails a little bit, it might be a little further out.
Okay, I guess I just want to clarify that, because the originals, the bike strategy was originally planned sort of as the funding was a three-year strategy to roll out with the funding. What got approved at council was a 4-year rollout. And so does that change in the timeline and the money associated with it change when we would be ready for bike share?
Through the chair, I think the money isn't necessarily the constraining factor. I think it's more of the processes we have to get through, the stakeholders we have to engage, the parallel things that need to be in place to get it all there. So process, yes, may extend it as well. I don't think the money is the factor.
All right, good. No, I want to be clear on that. Is it anticipated when I look at it and go, the infrastructure track is going along here, and we're starting to talk about what bike share could look like and what a business model could look like and how we might pay for it, and we're talking about here, and our goal is to end up at the same place. So when the infrastructure is ready, that this is also ready to go. So is there a degree of timing to this so that to make sure that if the infrastructure is ready in 2 years, we've got to actually initiate the work on bike share now?
Yes, they are to be run in parallel. And in fact, it's not just about that. There was much discussion this morning about safety and promotion and education. And something that we will be doing is putting together all those pieces in one schedule so that they do match and that they are synced so that they do arrive at a logical place with all those pieces in place. We don't have that now, but this is just step one of 5 steps. And there will be opportunities to come back here with step 2, step 3, and we'll have more detail, and we will have that business case that was talked about this morning. There's 7 different potential models that we could do this. We don't want to do business cases in all of them. The existing recommendation is to narrow it down a lot more to 1 or 2, then start doing the business case side of things, and that is built into recommendation number 2.
Okay, so you're not anticipating coming back now if we approve this in October and saying this is the definitive model, we have everything completely lined up and it's a full go, or you're going to...
No, there's another 3rd step, which is we have to secure the funding, be it sponsorship, be it federal money, whatever the sources might be. There's another step before it's go out and buy things and get it rolling.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. So we have the recommendations moved before us. Alderman Lowe on the recommendations.
Madam Chair, the difficulty I have with this, and I was probably telegraphing, is I felt this was just wildly premature. That it seems to me, and perhaps it's just my way of doing things, is that you get the infrastructure in place, you get the education program in place, you get some experience with it, and then you design a bike share program around it. And we're out of step here. So I appreciate Alderman Pincott's view, although I have some difficulty with the date. So I would say direct administration to return to SBC Transportation and Transit with a business model and funding strategy by 2013 October, which would be sufficient time to bring the matter to the budget adjustments in November of 2013. If I understood what you said, Mr. Mulligan, by that point we will have most of, or a good chunk of, the first 2 pieces of the way I see the world going in place. We'll have most of the infrastructure in place, and we'll have an education program out there, and we should have some sense by then of how we want to design this program around it. If I understand what we're talking about, clearly this is a bike share concept will work in the downtown core. It's not designed for me to get in a bike and ride to Heritage Park. And it's not for me to get on a bike and ride to the University or Mount Royal, perhaps Bow Valley College, but that would be about the extent of it. But, there's all these fuzzy edges around this that we don't understand. So that would be the time frame and the reason for my time frame, so that you can logically get it completed, get it through committee here, and then take it to the budget adjustment period. Because if there's operating or capital funding required, you'll need a way to get it in so you can start operationalizing the thing in 14, which I think is where you were going, was it not?
Well, through the chair, you're suggesting taking another whole year on top of what we just heard.
Well, because I think you're at least a year premature in this. That's my view.
Well,
Mr. Mulligan, please respond.
Through the chair, there's a couple things to consider. The schedule that's was shown in the presentation shows another whole year to mobilize after we get the go-ahead, and another half year to launch. So if we were to go 2 years, almost 2 years from now, it would be 4 to 5 years before this would hit the ground. And the other point to be made is that infrastructure that we're talking about, it's not just for bike share.
No, that's my whole problem. I think
a lot of that infrastructure is needed for the pressure from commuters and from more people living downtown all the time, and all the condos that are starting to come into downtown, all that infrastructure is required for that as well, and it's in the works. I mean, there's drawings, there's conceptually, we still have some engagement to do with stakeholders, but it's well on its way. So I think the timeline you're suggesting is too far out. They're both long processes, and if you wait for one to get done before you start the other, then it's going to get way into the future. There needs to be some parallel process. Granted, one's a little staggered from the other, but not consecutive, and I would suggest that's where you're going with that, all the way out to 2013 October. That's almost saying we need one before we can get going on the other. There's a lot of work to be done before we can make the final
I
decision.
think if we agree on one thing, Mr. Mulligan, it's the fact that the infrastructure's got to be in place and the education's got to be in place first.
Absolutely.
So hence, that's the reason for mine. I can't support the recommendations that are put in front of us. I could support a further timeout with a very clear indication that it gets done there, so it can move on to the next logical, budget adjustment date, so the business plan and capital and operating requests can get into the system and be dealt with.
Is that what you're suggesting as well, we could do?
No. What I heard Mr. Mulligan say is I'm putting a year too much in there.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Okay, so is that before us or not? Are you going to put that in there, 2013 or not?
Well, yeah, I'll put it in.
Okay, so the amendment's
but
2013 then. Just when it comes, yeah. So that's the amendment that's before us. Now, I had promised Alderman Keating that I would recognize him for the first amendment, but so let's deal with this amendment first. So only on this amendment to move the date out beyond to 2013. On this issue, let's just go through the lights. Alderman Carra on that amendment?
Sort of on the main motion.
No,
but
on the amendment, on the 2013.
I think, respectfully, Madam Chairman, I think my questions might influence my voting. I had some questions of administration,
okay,
and I'd like to ask those before I make a decision about how I vote on this amendment.
Go ahead.
I think we have an interesting situation here, and I appreciate Alderman Pincott and Alderman Lowe's questions. I love the idea of concurrency, sort of getting our ducks in a line, so when we actually have a dedicated cycle infrastructure, and if a company were to come in and bankroll the whole thing, everything would roll out at the same time. I'm interested in sort of the two approaches from the cycle advocacy groups that we heard. They're both basically saying the same thing. What has to come first is dedicated infrastructure, a education program, and then cycle infrastructure. And my question is, I think I made a rookie mistake when I made the amending motion that we take a look at, we refocus on the dedicated infrastructure lanes in the downtown, and that we re-engage the cycle community. My rookie mistake was that I never asked that it be brought back to committee. So I guess I'm going to ask you the question, where is that work? What are you guys thinking with regards to that work in light of your interaction with the cycle advocacy groups? And
One question at a time.
Okay.
If you can respond to that one.
Okay, through the chair, the question is, where does the physically separated bike lane network investigation stand, correct?
Yeah.
Well, we have begun engaging the cycling community, as you probably already know, on regular bike lanes, and we are committed to also looking at physically separated bike lanes, not necessarily the routes that were in the cycling strategy, and we're involved in doing that. So we're going to put a timetable together that identifies that as a separate project from the other bike facilities. We're in the middle of doing that. But we don't have, as you said, we don't have a timeline to work to because we weren't given one. But in our minds, it should be done in parallel with the other work that we're doing. And we, despite what was mentioned earlier this morning, we are proceeding with that on both fronts.
Okay, I guess this is a question for GM Logan then, maybe? How would I sort of request that, I mean, because there is, here's another question before I ask this question. There is the concern that we are spending staff and time resources putting together a bike share program that would be better spent on education plan and dedicated cycle infrastructure first. And that gets to sort of the question of concurrency or one after the other that Alderman Pincott and Alderman Lowe raised. And I'm not sure I have an answer that makes sense in my mind yet. What is our staff allotment? Could we put more effort into the dedicated cycle infrastructure and the education program first and then roll out? How does that work? And GM Logan, you can weigh in on this too if you'd like, obviously.
There's two questions there. One is, do we have the staff to do all these things? And then can we dedicate some to physically separated bike lanes? And the answer to the first question is yes. We were given more staff as part of the budget deliberations in November. We're in the process of hiring those. And we have people today who have worked and are dedicated in large part to cycling. So the staff issue, I don't think is a concern. I think we can do all this work concurrently. The issue of dedicating them to the dedicated bike lanes, that is problematic. And I think our whole approach to cycling downtown, 4 years ago we had nothing on road. If you were cycling downtown, you had to either be illegally in the sidewalk or you were fighting it out with cars. We have come a fair distance. We still have a long, long way to go, but we do have not physically separated. We have bike lanes on 11th Street, 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue. We've got plans to add 2 or 3 more roads this year. And there's a number of other, and East Village has them built into the plan in places. So there's real progress being made, but going all the way to physically separated bike routes is a huge leap from, especially when just a few years ago we had nothing. And until we get specific direction, unless we get specific direction, that is an extremely challenging ask because of all the other stakeholders that would be impacted.
I appreciate the how complicated it is, but we'll be here till the cows come home on this cow share or bike share program. I understand that you need the information to make a decision on this one, but I do need to rein us back in a little. Everything is all related, but what's before us is a feasibility study. That's what we're being asked to decide on today. So I'll just try to remind you of that. If there's something else that you need to talk to GM Logan about as far as how you get this other matter on the agenda, as to time to come back, we could do a motion arising at council in relation to this report if you wish.
I appreciate that, Madam Chairwoman, and maybe a notice of motion is the way to go. Maybe there's a way to attach it to this, but with regards to this feasibility study, I mean, the fundamental question for me is whether this is the time to be doing this feasibility study or whether we should be putting our resources into the much more complex but much more preliminary task of laying out a connected network. Because as a cyclist downtown, you know, one of my least favorite things to do is to be riding in a cycle lane and reach the end of said cycle lane and be like,
Okay. You're starting to sound like, okay. Are you done?
I'm not sure I have a answer to my question, so I don't know how I'm going to vote.
Okay. As long as it's brief, okay.
As part of the planning that we're doing on the reports for the year and the agenda for the committee, administration can generate a report with an update on implementation of the cycling strategy for committee, if committee so desires. Without a notice of motion, we can add it to our agenda.
Thank you. That's great. Consider it
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on the amendment of the 2013, and I just want to really only deal with that amendment that's before us. So back to the lights. We are on to light number Alderman Demong, the bright light down there.
Just because the roof reflects the shine. Okay, this directs. I concur completely with Alderman Lowe in that I think this is wildly premature as well. A lot of the cities that you report on with regards to their bike sharing program have just recently started their bike sharing program. Boston started last year, July 2011. Ottawa started in May 2011. Toronto just last spring as well. New York City is starting this year. Denver is the longest one out, going back to April of 2010. So when we talk about doing a feasibility study, why wouldn't we simply sit back on our hands for 6 months to a year and allow these 5, 6 different metropolitans to actually do a practical feasibility study for us? Come back to us next year, say, hey, it's working great here, here, and here. Let's take those learnings and adjust them to us. Why would we go about doing all of the work ourselves when this work is being done for us on a practical basis?
Through the chair, I think we are doing what you're suggesting. We are talking to Toronto, we're talking to other cities and learning, and Bixie talks about a 4th generation of bikes. There is a fair bit of experience that's being accumulated. You are right. It is a relatively new phenomena in the world. But there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and so we are doing that. And our launch, as it stands now, is 2014. So we're not talking about implementing this year or even next year. So we have even more time to learn from them as we ask questions about how we could do it here. So I think we're set up to do that.
Okay. I appreciate what you're saying, but you're still wanting to do the work on the feasibility study. I'm simply saying, let's sit back. Let's let them do the work for a change. Let's see what they do. And next year at this time, we can come in, they'll have done it. I mean, most of these haven't even done a complete year yet. They haven't even seen what their final year looks like. So,
On the amendment?
this is on the amendment. This is why I'm asking these questions as to whether we should delay it for this amount of time. Your comment that Bixie is reasonably new, or is a new 4th generation, is the other part that really gives me concern, why I want to sit back and watch it for a bit. My understanding is Montreal just did a bailout to the tune of $108 million for Bixie. This is something that frightens me. I realize we wouldn't be on the hook for that in any way, shape, or form, but why don't we just kind of take a step back, hold off till October 2013, and take learnings from other cities?
So could I get you to respond to some of those comments?
Through the chair, excuse me. I think Montreal, which is Bixie, the Montreal system is unique, and it's a challenge to understand. But essentially, it was the direction of the political body of the city saying, get a bike share system in place, do it. And the administration followed that direction, and they didn't have the advantage, they didn't take the opportunity to do a feasibility study. They didn't do the background. What they did was they essentially invented that 4th generation bike that Don mentioned. They invented the stations that these bikes go into. They invented the software, hardware, firmware, all of that to operate the system. The bike was designed. The bike was designed as part of this parcel. They did the whole package. I guess it would be like if we were directed to put boat transportation on the Elbow or the Bow River, and we had to design the boats and all of the infrastructure. So we have learned greatly as has Toronto and Ottawa, using Canadian examples. Toronto and Ottawa have used the Bixby system, which is the Public Bike Share Corporation system, not with the millions of dollars of losses through development and all of that. So I would say that we have done a huge learning from the experiences of Montreal, as has London, which uses the same system, Melbourne, Australia, which was brought up, Minneapolis. So there is a learning curve, absolutely. I think we're catching on the benefit of a system that was developed in 2009.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I personally, I agree with Alderman Lowe. I think we should be tabling this until we should be looking back to October 13th. But I would almost suggest that we take a 9-month breather, come back at this time next year, and just basically sit on it. Let these cities roll it out. Let's see what it looks like in different cities, and then decide at next year at this time to say whether we want to go forward. It would give you the exact same time frame. We'd just simply be taking a year off to see what the results are in other cities.
Among that would maybe be a different motion. If you wanted to table this matter for a year, then that would be another one that I could recognize.
I realize that, but we're on a different...
I would recognize you for it, if that's your wish. So back to the amendment, the 2013, we have get caught up with ourselves here. Alderman Hodges.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Alderman Jones is before you.
Oh, okay. I won't say thank you. I'll say thank you later.
At 2013 October, is the business model and funding strategy to include private enterprise, or is it just strictly related to public? Are we looking at like a private company coming in and the possibility of doing it, or strictly doing it on our own?
We're looking at any number of possibilities. There's 7 different funding strategies that could emerge. It could be totally privately held, or it could be a major sponsor. We think in Calgary, we're well positioned for a big oil company, for example, to come in and be a major sponsor, just as has been done in UK. It was a bank. That's part of what we want to explore next.
You're saying that coming in and sponsoring, are you still looking at us operating it, or a private contractor operating it?
No.
The reason I'm asking the question is if that isn't a part of your strategy, and I hope it is a part of your strategy, I'm wondering if you need the extra time to October to do that, because it seems to be a bit more encompassing, because you'd probably have to do an expression of interest in the private sector to see if you need that, and you'd need time for an expression of interest.
Through the chair, it's really what's happening is there are several different models which could include, excuse me, a private corporation, coming in and saying, if you will allow us, we will do it, to the complete opposite side. And I'm not suggesting this is what we do. The complete opposite side is council saying, we think it's a good idea, give us the dollars that it's going to cost us, and we'll go ahead. And I think between those two extremes are the other options of a nonprofit organization running it with private capital, with money that comes from, as Don has said. I think we're well positioned for the energy sector to put a very green face on their activities. So I think there's several models, not one exclusive model, and the benefit of the October time is to do what you say, is research and find out exactly where we could go, and that gives us the opportunity to continue to move forward, as opposed to stopping now, I guess, if this is an answer to your question, stopping now and just waiting a certain amount of time before starting up again, I think.
So the October 13th, or the October 2013 timeline would be of benefit then? It wouldn't be a detriment?
Through the chair, I would see that as being a benefit to this process.
That makes a big difference to me. The other thing I want to know, and I never saw it anywhere in the report, was who accepts liability and what is the liability?
Through the chair, liability issues, as I understand, and I'm not law, but as I understand from other public bike share companies or public bike share systems that are in operation in North America, part of the agreement when you subscribe, so every person who uses a bike must commit to an agreement. Even if it's just using your Visa or MasterCard, you do agree to terms and conditions. If you become a year-long member, you agree to those same terms and conditions, and the liability issues are laid out in the terms and conditions.
You don't need time to put that together. It's basically will be done by law in that time frame.
Yeah.
I think absolutely, and that goes back to Alderman DeMong's question. I've got a copy of Toronto's agreement.
Mr. Mulligan, could you reconcile the timeline here? Because I think I was sort of hearing a couple things here, that time would be a benefit, but from what respect in relation to what you were saying? If we could keep our answers a bit more succinct, that would be helpful.
Chair, I was just trying to get the exhibit up that showed the 5 steps, but I mean, it seems to me we're debating how far out we defer this or extend it.
Yes.
There was one suggestion of October this year, and then there's another suggestion to go, in addition to that, another full year. I think we would welcome the additional time this year, but if the committee makes a decision to go another full year, you're essentially putting the whole thing on hold. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But
okay.
There's 2 other steps after that step. So if you're putting it on hold for a year, you're extending the whole thing out another year and a half. So we wouldn't see bike share till probably 2015. So that's the decision before you.
Alderman.
So do you need the time frame or not?
We need the time frame to October this year, but we certainly don't need another whole year on top of that.
You said the opposite when I asked the question before.
Who?
There may have been a disconnect there.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah.
I misunderstood what October we were talking about, 13 or 12.
Yes, thank you. So on this amendment, Alderman Hodges.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's left to me, everybody's got a calendar, I thought, left to me to mention October 2013 is the municipal election. We don't have policy committee meetings in October for the last 2 successive municipal elections in a row.
Well,
further to that, with Alderman Jones's amendment a couple of years ago, there were no policy committee meetings following nomination day, which was a great amendment. So it was taken out of the calendar in 2010, taken out of the calendar in 2007. So I don't know where the report's going to go, but I don't support the idea of extending out that far in any case. But I just want to mention, if you leave October in there, I don't know who they're going to report to.
Ms. Diller, GM Logan says that you could substitute it with July if you'd like to make that amendment.
But I don't wish to do that, and I agree. I agree, Madam Chairman, that could be done, but I don't want to suggest that. I'm just saying I think October 2013 is a non-starter, but another
I
date.
think I actually heard Alderman Lowe say July. That's what I thought. Okay, so it's July. And so who else now wants to kick the cat on this one? Alderman Carra, we've had you speak on this one. And Alderman Pincott, you want to speak to the date, Alderman Pincott?
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to support the amendment to July 2013. I think we've heard clearly that there are more steps to how all of this rolls out. That if we want to look at having however the program rolls out, whether it's public or private, but let's say it's a private system. we need to actually develop the strategy, what that could look like, have council say, yeah, we want to keep going down this road, and then start rolling it out to see what are the expressions of interest. Because we certainly can't expect that somebody in the private sector or private industry is going to come together and create a business plan in 3 months and capitalize it and do all of that to be able to actually initiate this. So I think that as I moved it with October 2012 being the next date to come back to us with what the next step could look like is appropriate. It's appropriate for the amount of work that administration needs to do. It's appropriate for the timelines of the strategy the council has approved, and it's appropriate for, if we do have a private partner, it gives them appropriate time to be able to actually look at how they could do it, put a full business plan together so that they can roll it out. So I won't support extending it. I think that, you know, if Mr. Mulligan says that it could potentially, you know, this might push it back to 2015, I think that might be optimistic, actually. That it would be more like 2016. So I would encourage council committee to not support the change, to allow the next phase to come back to us in October of this year. It'll be the same committee, the same group of us as well, which is another reason why I chose that it would be before Org Day, so that we can then, as a group, look at what the next steps are and allow plenty of time for the next step to occur.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Keating, on the amendment of the date?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we redirect resources that are working at it now into other projects if this date would go through?
Well, we can always redirect resources if necessary, but I don't see that we'll be challenged that way. I think we have enough resources.
I guess more specifically, my question is, do we have other things that they could be doing until the date? Meaning that, because it wouldn't take a year and a half to do the study, the feasibility study, it would only take those few months. So more than likely, if this date goes through, you would put it on hold and you would start it up again in a year and sometime.
Through the chair, yeah, we could do that. It's just a decision of how far out you want bike share to, assuming you do, when you want it to appear in Calgary. And we have lots of projects. We have a new bike strategy. We do have new staff to do all of that. So there's no shortage of things to do.
Okay. Madam Chair, I did make a commitment before, and I always like to say what I would do. Alderman Farrell did say that if we were done before on any votes, if we could table it, and if the tabling goes through, that's fine. If it doesn't, then we know the will of the committee. But I did state that I would table this and bring the other item up at the time, so I so move that.
That was to accommodate our colleague.
That's right, yeah. So
all those in favor of tabling and moving to the next item?
Agreed.
Great. Opposed? One opposed. Alderman Jones opposed. That's carried. So if you would just stand down and allow us to proceed. Thanks, Alderman Keating. I appreciate that. So we're now on to Calgary Transit Business Plan Update, 2012-01. And I don't think we need a... well, are you prepared to give a presentation?
I can give a presentation if the committee so wishes.
So, Alderman Lowe, do you wish a presentation or?
No, I don't. I've read it. It complies with council's direction during the budget debates. It's, in my view, patently regrettable. I fail to understand how when we claim that transit's our number one priority, then we cut services. That's but I'm not even sure how, given that council's directed this to happen, that we can do anything more than accept it at this point. There is an opportunity at budget finalization to make changes, and another one in November. So it's sad. It's just desperately sad. And if you just confirm for me one more time that there will be no new service in new communities.
Just to confirm, there will be, with the addition of hours that came with the funding, one new community will receive service, and that will be in 2013. Silverado will be a small extension. Other than that, there was a limited envelope to provide service to new communities.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair, painful as it is, I will move the recommendations because, quite frankly, I think there's little choice.
Is there anyone from the public that wishes to address the committee? Thank you. The item has been moved and on the table, at least, anyways. So, Alderman Hodges.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I agree with the motion. This report reflects the council decisions of last November, as Alderman Lowe's reminded us, of which not everyone agreed, but that was the decision. So I don't think we need to dwell on it anymore unless someone thinks they have 10 votes in their hip pocket for reconsideration, which I haven't heard, so that there is. So I'd support the motion.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor?
Agreed.
Opposed? I'm opposed. Carried. Thank you.
Philosophically, I'm opposed too, but process-wise,
Thank you.
our hands are tied.
So Alderman Lowe and Alderman Collier-Urquhart are opposed. Anyone else opposed? Call the roll, please. Call the roll. Why? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you, we tried. Thanks for your work. There'll be another day.
Always another day.
There'll be another day. Thank you. So, a motion to lift from the table the previous item? Alderman Hodges, thank you. Okay, so we're back to the bike share program for those at home watching this comedy.
Madam Chairman, could we ask one of the staff to retrieve any members of council that may be wandering the halls?
It might go quicker if we just stay with the number that we have. Madam Clerk, if you could put up the amendment.
You're such friendly guys.
Oh, dear. And I believe that Alderman Keating had the floor, actually, and did you want to speak to the amendment of extending it out, Alderman Keating, to 2013?
No, I'm done, thank you.
You're done, but I will recognize you because you have an amendment yourself that you presented to me. So, Council, are you ready for the question on moving the date to 2013? Okay. All those in favor? Agreed. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed. Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
On Alderman Lowe's motion to amend the date to 2013 October, is that correct, October? It is July? Okay.
Okay.
Alderman Carra. Oh, I'm sorry, he's not here.
He's among the missing.
Go.
Alderman Keating.
Yes.
Alderman Hodges.
No.
Alderman Jones.
No.
Alderman Lowe.
We're in the middle of a vote.
Yeah, I understand.
Alderman Pincott.
No.
Alderman Collier-Urquhart.
Yes.
That's lost on a tie.
Alderman Keating? Alderman Keating, you have another amendment you'd like to make?
Yeah, if we could put it up, we'll go from there. Regardless of the date and the plan, I do realize that the city has expended resources on planning and promoting and going forward with this, and I have absolutely no difficulty with that. I do have difficulty with us going forward in any way, shape, or form with city funds being part of the program. Therefore, my amendment is that I agree with the plan, accommodate, and promote, but we have to make the stand in saying that under no circumstances will municipal funds be used either in the purchase of capital assets or in the operation that goes forward. And so there is my amendment.
Okay, thank you. To speak to that amendment, Alderman Jones?
I don't know who to ask the question of. Do you feel that, Mr. Logan maybe, do you feel that this might be a little premature? They have to do the process before they can find out if they can get public sponsorship and to carry on. I'm just wondering if this might not be better done in October of this year rather than, because if you're not going to allow any public funding, it dies today. As far as the way I read that.
Alderman Jones, through the chair, I would interpret it that that would take the 7 models that were evaluated and limit them to 1 or 2. I don't think it would completely kill it, but it would basically say that it would have to be fully publicly funded or fully privately sponsored or a business that could fund it entirely on its own. So
I'm totally in favor of private enterprise doing this. But I think we have to be the ones to promote and accommodate it. And there's going to be associated costs with it. So I don't know how to vote on this. It's kind of awkward. So listen to other debates. And
I think the motion should be changed. Leave it to the mover. If the city is going to be involved in promoting something, it's going to involve public funding, so undoubtedly, as Alderman Jones has just alluded to. So life's not that simple, guys. Then the other aspect is how you define public funding. That could be provincial, it could be federal, it would still be the use of public funding. So I won't support the motion, given all the...
Okay, thank you. Alderman Pincott.
Yeah, I actually, I tend to agree with Alderman Jones. I think that if we want to make a decision like this, I think it would be better to do it when we have sort of the suite of feasible business models that might be before us. In October, I think that I think it would be great if if there could be no public funding in rolling it out. If it could be either private industry or the city promoting and accommodating a partnership of not-for-profits and assisting in getting sponsorship dollars and things like that. But that, even to get to that point, will require public funding. I won't support this. I do think it is premature.
Thank you. To close, Alderman Keating?
Thank you. I think the idea, and we certainly could change the wording completely, and if we want to get rid of the word public and put in City of Calgary, then I have no difficulty with that amendment, and I would propose that if we can. There have been municipalities who have said, let's go with bike share, but they have stated this exactly, that there will be no public, and by public I mean City of Calgary funds associated with the capital cost or the operational costs, and that has been done. We talked about it today, where Toronto was one, and I thought Boston is another one. I thought New York was one, but I could be wrong there. So we have 3 municipalities that I'm aware of who have stated this with their bike share program, just in the last little while. So it is not something that is out of the ordinary. It is municipalities who are being fiscally responsible and saying that so far we haven't seen any bike share programs that have run at a neutral basis that I'm aware of. They have all run into a deficit, whether it is operational or whether it is, and even the report states that if it isn't feasible, we can always sell the equipment and recoup our costs. Well, we know that just doesn't work, because whatever you sell it for is far less than what you paid for. So I think if we're going ahead, and I have no problem with going ahead, and I have no problem with the city being an active participant in this program, I have great difficulty with the city being an active financier in this program. And I think that's what this tries to separate. Allow us to go ahead, allow some city resources being allowed to promote and plan and give them spots on city land to put their stations without charging rent and those sorts of things, but do not allow the city put in 1 penny into the operations or the capital costs, because if we do, I would predict that we're going to be at a deficit year after year, and I have no idea how high that may go. Therefore, the City of Calgary is perfectly fine, and if the province and the federal government wants to put in contributions, fabulous. I think that's their contribution, the same as our contribution is allowing resources here already, and we are spending money already, and I have no problem with that. But we can't get into the business of renting bikes. Thank you.
Okay.
Closed.
I put the City of Calgary, just to clarify that, after public funding. Okay, please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
On Alderman Keating's amendment, Alderman Demong.
Yes.
Alderman Hodges.
Yeah, the change means I can support the motion, so I support it.
Alderman Jones. Alderman Keating.
Yes.
Alderman Lowe.
Yes.
Alderman Pincott.
No.
Alderman Colley-Urquhart. The motion's carried.
Alderman Hodges, you have your light on?
Madam Chairman, the problem I have from the beginning with this report, and I'll try to be brief, it's almost 2 o'clock. There's too many unknowns with this thing. There's a fair amount of review done from other cities. It's quite an interesting report when you see all of the different cities in different parts of the world that have experimented or are trying to encourage a bike share program. I don't question the environmental or health aspects of this sort of a proposal, but I think it's premature at the present time, as other members of the committee have said earlier today. It's premature. It seems to me set up to draw the city into either operating or capital costs or both. I don't agree with that, and therefore I won't be supporting the recommendations. Thanks.
Okay. Alderman Demong.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with Alderman Hodges. I do believe it's wildly premature. I believe we need to do as much learnings from the other cities that are going ahead first, and that we need, if this is going to succeed, we would need to have the infrastructure network catch up. I would therefore like to put an amendment, to table it until January 2013 and then proceed after 1 year of learnings and see where we go from there.
So you're tabling the report and the recommendations till February 2013.
Correct.
Have we got that one up? I'll just proceed. So let's do it.
So what I'm getting at with that is we have a number of cities, large cities, that are going ahead and going forward with this. A lot of them have already started, but they haven't even gone through a full year on this, colleagues. We have an infrastructure program that we've just voted on back in budget in November. That's a 4-year program to roll out the infrastructure network. I think it behooves us to act prudently and to allow this some, as they say in the wine culture, some breathing time. Let's see what the other cities come up with over the next year. Let's take our learnings from them. Let's not jump in with both feet, and let's see what this comes up with in a year. And at that point, we will take another look at it.
Just a recommendation. Thank you. To speak to the tabling till February, Alderman Pincott.
Well, I'm not going to support that. Look, vote against it. Kill it. Vote against it. Kill it if you want. I mean, go ahead. But don't take the work that administration has done and has been working on. Don't take the work that the cycling community has done and has been working on. Don't take the bike strategy that this is a part of and put chunks of it on hold and just go, well, we'll make a decision later. Actually make a decision now. Kill it if you want. Vote against it. Don't just discount the work that people have been doing, the time that people have invested in this, and just say, well, yeah, well, we can wait. You know, the work you've done isn't so good. We'll wait and see what Minneapolis has brought to the table, or Denver, or Toronto. Vote against it. Put a bullet in its head. Don't choke it to death.
We've been filibustering Alderman Farrell. Alderman Lowe, to speak to the tabling.
The tabling can only be discussed in relation to time.
So what do you think about the time?
My question is to Mr. Logan and Mr. Mulligan. What does that do to all of the things that Alderman Pincott just talked about when he shouldn't have talked about it?
Madam Chair, I think one of the key things we need to recall about a tabling, if we table the report, then we bring the same report back.
Yeah.
Which means we won't be able to incorporate anything that we've learned.
Yeah.
So that's not really the key there is that we would table the recommendations, which effectively says we don't want the business model quite yet. But I think we need to be clear that it's not tabling the report.
Yeah.
So as to time?
No comment in time.
Okay. Alderman Farrell?
So, I'm so sorry I missed the debate, but I guess we'll have the opportunity at committee. So at council, I missed a lot of the questions. I kind of wish we could have tabled this to another meeting. From what I understand from the presentations, both from members of the public and from members of administration, is there seems to be an agreement that you need cycling infrastructure in place before this is adequate, or before this we'd contemplate it. But we have made that commitment.
Okay, so we're on a tabling as to time.
Yes, and I'm debating the tabling. So we've made a commitment to fund the cycling strategy, and we're well underway in providing adequate cycling facilities in the downtown core. In fact, it's quite exciting work. So I think the tabling is just an effort to delay something that is a good idea. We're not making a decision on.
Yeah.
Well, I thought somebody else tabled, or was debating the tabling.
Well, yeah.
Are we allowing
and
debating or
I'm allowing
not?
you this because you just walked in and you didn't have a chance to say anything else. So I'm trying to, if we can stick as close as we can
To time, I think let's proceed. There's a lot of work to be done, and tabling is just freezing it in time and not proceeding with the work.
Okay.
So there are some questions that need being answered, absolutely. But tabling is simply a delay tactic, and I think we're ready to find out more about this program.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Marr, you wish to declare an interest in this item? Yeah? Thank you. We're open. Okay, so we're now on to Alderman Carra on the tabling as to time.
I've got nothing to add to the tabling as to time.
Who's in C? Oh, Alderman Marr, do you want to speak to the tabling? No.
Yes, I will. Sorry, I was watching it on the television upstairs, and was actually quite moved by Alderman Pincott's response.
It moved you from there to here?
It did. It transported me in a very literal sense. So,
How did you get here?
I think that there is certainly a lot to be said for the serious amount of work that city staff have put into this, into the coordinated response between
Yeah. The time it took to do the work?
the time that it took to do the work. Absolutely. And I won't be supporting the tabling at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's the time.
Thank you. So are we ready for the question on Alderman Demong's tabling motion? Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Carra.
Yes.
Alderman Demong.
Yes.
Alderman Farrell.
No.
Alderman Hodges. Alderman Jones. Alderman Keating.
Yes.
Alderman Lowe.
No.
Alderman Marr. No. Alderman Pincott.
No.
Alderman Collier-Cart.
Yes.
The motion is lost.
Okay. I will recognize Alderman Carra. Alderman Carra, I'll recognize you. You have 2 amendments you'd like to make.
Well, I'm sort of at a quandary, Madam Chairman, primarily because my amendment was an amendment to amendment, and what it sought to do was to sort of, my impression was that committee, if they had decided to push it back, that we would then direct the staff time and other resources associated with bringing this report, this feasibility study forward, in the interim towards solving the more fundamental issue of complete east-west, north-south, a network of dedicated cycle infrastructure through Calgary's inner city. And then when we did report back on the progress on the cycle network, whether that was the appropriate time to commence work on the bicycle share feasibility. I'm not sure how that motion would fit right now, but I honestly, in my questions with administration, I understand we have a chicken and egg here. I understand that a concurrent bike share and cycle infrastructure would be ideal. I think that if we had a great bike share program laid out, it might provide the impetus to build more cycle infrastructure, especially if we had a private firm step in and want to sponsor it. But at the same time, every time we talk about a dedicated network of, like a network of dedicated cycle infrastructure, I don't get the sense that we're totally talking about the same thing, and I think that that's where all of our staff resources should be focused. And until we solve that fundamental problem, education and bike share are nice to haves, not need
So
to
I
haves.
think we'll hold off on your amendments. So there's 2 things. We could certainly do a motion arising at council. We can't do it here. And GM Logan has another thought.
Chair, I might suggest that number 2 be amended to when we report back in October 2012, that we include as part of that report an update on the implementation of the cycling strategy, so that council has that information when they're asked to make the decision.
Was that your amendment then?
Yeah, I can live with that. I'm just concerned that,
Okay, yes or no? I mean, we don't need to do it here.
you know what, I'm going to wait until I can make a motion arising at council, and I think I'm going to talk to General Mac Logan with this. Thank you.
Mr. Logan, that would be
Mr.
great.
Logan.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize. Mr. Logan. Getting all familiar.
Our next speaker is, it's not you, Lillian. You're trying to get the typing there. Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. I think that is a very good amendment that Mr. Logan suggested.
I thought it was
So
too, but-
I'll put that forward if Alderman Carrara.
It's up on the screen. Please.
So an update on the progress of the cycling strategy, concurrent with this report.
You have that written out? No. Can we put it up, Madam Clerk, on the screen? Okay.
Is that feasible? Thank you.
That isn't what we're working off of, though. We had
That's
Alderman
what's before
Keating's
us right
amendment
now.
as well.
Now, is the amendment on number 2, or is it not? Madam Chair?
Let's just allow the city clerk to try to figure out the system here. Okay, there's the one we're working off of. Alderman Farrell, you were looking at number 2? Okay, where were you suggesting, Mr. Logan?
Madam Chair, my suggestion would be to direct administration to return to the SBC on transportation and transit with a business model with a insert update on the implementation of the cycling strategy in conjunction with.
Oh, slow down. They're not quite getting it here.
It would be insert between A and business model under number 2.
After October.
Go up to
Yes.
2, second line, after with a.
With a.
Put your cursor in after a, before B.
With actually it would be an update on the implementation of the cycling strategy.
On the cycling, with an update on the.
Cycling strategy
Implementation.
in conjunction with.
That's a very good suggestion, Mr. Logan. Thank you.
In conjunction with A.
With a.
There you go. That's it.
And
So that committee can see all of the information.
okay, put the amendment in bold, please. Alderman Farrell, is that what you were asking for? Good. Okay, so now we're going to go to speak to that amendment, Alderman Marr.
I was actually speaking to the entire thing, but now that this is on the floor, I think it's very, very interesting. It does broaden the conversation, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Hodges?
Madam Chairman, I won't be supporting this amendment because it doesn't solve the issues that we've seen in the report that other cities have confronted, and that's with respect to a sustainable source of funding, not including the city of Calgary, and a number of other unknowns that are out there that we don't have answers for. So rather than embark on what would effectively be a pioneering program in just the city of Calgary, and our taxpayers eventually, I think, being on the hook for some or all of the costs, maybe it's I'm more cautious than others would be, but I don't want another report on the implementation of a suggested business model and funding strategy. I don't need any more reports. This one was quite comprehensive and points out what a number of the issues are based on the experience of other cities. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Lowe.
Well, this one goes most of the way to solving the issue I have with what I consider a very premature report, in that fundamentally it says, tell us where the cycling strategy is. And then it also says, bring a business model, but limited to really 2 of the 7 models that you set out. So it's probably gone far enough for me to support it at this point. But I'll be very interested in the report in October, because the 2 of them have got to tie together, and you've also got to link it into a budget cycle someplace. Because even though we say there won't be any City of Calgary funding, like Alderman Hodges, virtually everything we do at some point in time reaches into the public purse. And I just need to understand how that will work.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Carra?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm uncomfortable with the motion because I agree an update on the implementation of the cycling strategy is really important. I'm not convinced that the concurrency that we're trying to achieve with the bike share program is the best strategy. I think what we really want to do is focus on a dedicated network of separated cycle lanes, east-west, north-south, throughout the inner city. I haven't been convinced by administration that that's priority number one for administration. So maybe what I would ask is that we sort of A and B that, so direct administration to return to the SBC on transportation and transit, an update on the implementation of the cycling strategy, and then B, a business model and funding strategy.
Being linked together now with this amendment. I'll call them separately when we get there if you want.
Yeah, I'm saying, because I mean, I think what we really need, what I need is, I don't buy the chicken and egg argument. I think that one follows the other. I think the network, the education, then the bike share. And what we've heard from administration today through question and answer is that the network is really complicated and there's a lot of stakeholders. And that's, I think, where we should be spending our resources and our time and our staff time, is solving that problem first. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm voting against an update on the cycle strategy.
Okay.
And that's my concern with how these are linked together in this motion.
Okay. Thank you. Alderman Pincott?
Yeah, I'll support this amendment. I think it's good. It starts actually tying the things together, which in my mind have always been together. Bike share has been part of our cycle strategy, and I think bringing this together makes what I've understood to be implicit, makes it overt, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Alderman Marr?
I just have a point of clarification for the administration on number 3, and I know that this was discussed, but I didn't get an opportunity to ask a question, if you wouldn't mind. So, it's the amendment that has already been passed. But no, I've already spoken on Amendment 2.
Alderman Farrell's.
So, on Alderman Farrell's, I've spoken on it, but I do have one tiny question, if you'll allow it, and that is, in the event that we had a major corporate sponsor, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, whomever, I don't care. The way I read number 3 is that we wouldn't be able to maintain the land that these are accommodated on in terms of cleaning it up, and we couldn't even do joint advertising, City of Calgary, with whoever the corporate sponsor is. Is that the way your administration would interpret this when it says no public funds at all? Or is that not how you'd interpret it?
Through the chair, I believe Alderman Keating mentioned things like spaces allocated for bike modules would not contravene that statement, so there would be some leeway, is the way I understood it. It's not an absolute. That's your question, I think?
Well, that was one of my questions, yeah, because I mean, when I read that, it says, but do not allow any public funds. I read that as not one penny. But that's...
okay, so we're not on that
No,
particular one.
I appreciate that.
I
just did get that question. Thank you.
Okay, we can come back to that, though, after we vote on this amendment. I don't see any other questions on the amendment that's before us. And if you could look at number 3 and not make it bold anymore because it passed. Did it? I thought it did. So it should be regularly not carried. Thank you. So we're only focusing this amendment on the bold part. If you would call the roll, Madam Clerk. Thank you.
On Alderman Farrell's amendment, Alderman Carra?
No.
Alderman Demong?
No.
Alderman Farrell? Alderman Hodges?
No.
Alderman Jones? Alderman Keating?
No.
Alderman Lowe? Oh, yeah. Alderman Marr? Alderman Pincott?
Yes.
Alderman Collier-Cart?
Yes.
That's carried.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see any further amendments or any lights on except for Alderman Pincott's, and that's to close.
Can you call the items separately when you call them, Madam Chair? Possible?
Your light's not on, Alderman Hodges, but your speaker's on. So which would you want? Okay, so we do have a light on now. So to debate, it's you turned on your speaker instead of your other one. So Alderman Hodges, I'll recognize you for the debate now on the recommendations as amended.
Yeah, let's be brief. 20 after 2. I am not in favor of the recommendations as amended. I'm done. Number 3, I agree with, and I think Alderman Marr's coming on with some more, so I expect we're going to be here till 3 o'clock. But essentially, mark me opposed, Madam Chairman. Thanks.
You want me to call them separately?
That'd be a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you. And Alderman Demong to speak on the recommendations as amended.
It's unfortunate. We have an opportunity to do all kinds of learnings for free, to have other cities do the work for us. All we need to do is sit back and have them do it. But we insist on actually spending our own money to do it when there's no reason to. So on those basis, I kind of agree with Alderman Hodges, with him, ditto. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. Well, we do have the opportunity to learn from other cities, and but we still have to study as far as the Calgary context. And so regardless of whether we're first up or last, we need to look at other examples, learn from them, but tailor it to the Calgary marketplace and the Calgary community. So we can't get away from doing this body of work if we want to look at a bike share program. And it's really down to, do you want to look at a bike share program? Is this the right time? And those are really the two questions, yes or no, and when. I'm ready to continue to look at it. We haven't adopted it yet, but I think it's worth exploring. And a lot of cities have very positive experience with bike share. And I'd like to, and some have had a very negative experience. Let's learn from them and move forward. Thank you.
Alderman Jones? Another amendment?
No, not another amendment. I want to go home. I agree with number 1 and 2. I don't agree with number 3. I think number 3 is premature. I would love to see it done by a private individual or a private company. But I think that the city has to promote and accommodate it, and I think we have to use our funds or our staff time to do that. And I don't know how we get away with that between now and October. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote against number 3, but agree with 1 and 2, but I would really like to see it become a private venture as opposed to a public one.
I hear you. So I'll call them separately for you. Okay? And Alderman Keating. Or, I'm sorry, Carra.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sort of aghast here that I'm going to be voting against bike share, which I love. But the question is whether this is the time to do it or not. And in our questions today with administration, I'm not convinced that we are putting the appropriate weight on the first step to a successful bike share, which is a dedicated network of cycle infrastructure. And I'm not convinced that we can do everything concurrently from the responses I got from administration. And so, nightmare scenario, I'm voting against bike share.
Alderman Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I've always said that we have to investigate, look, and find out where we're going, and I think in some ways that's what this does. Number 3, during my debate, and it might be missing there, but I explicitly said no capital or operational funds, and I thought I put in promote and accommodate, meaning that we can do that, and we are spending resources at this point, but we cannot get into the actual business of renting the bike rather than getting into a whole lot of other aspects, and that's where that funding has come from, and that can be clarified at a later time. But the city certainly could promote it and accommodate it on city lands, but they cannot get into the actual operation or the capital expenditures of a bike share program. We are getting an update back in October, and basically I want to make sure that that report states this is the model we can use, and it only says that, and then we move forward. This is basically a study or a report come back, can we? And if we cannot, then that's fine, and we have another decision to make in October. As much as I'm extremely leery of the fact that we're going down this, I'm always open to the idea of studying it and then making a decision in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Marr?
Thank you, Chair. My concern really is, and Alderman Keating very kindly has handed me a note and expressed his clarification of what he meant. My concern is that we live and die, and the administration responds to the written word, not the intent or the spirit of what was said. So my thought now is I would urge committee to either A, reconsider number 3, or B, vote down number 3 so a new number 3 could be made. But right now, at this moment, the words say no funding whatsoever. Doesn't say that we can use staff time. We can also help to investigate this. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay. I think it would have been helpful had you been here for 3, but it did say that we could put in those indirect resources, but not to be directly funding operating and capital. So.
Yes, I appreciate that, but unfortunately, what is shown here in the recommendations that would be sent to council and ultimately to administration is not there. Thank you.
Okay. I'll call them separately, Alderman Marr. Alderman Pincott, to close, please.
Well, thank you. To close, first off, I want to be quite clear with everyone. We're not saying we're going to do bike share tomorrow. Everybody, administration, the cycling community, members of the committee as well have said, we're not ready. We don't have the infrastructure in place. This is about doing the work to as the cycling strategy moves forward, as it's implemented, as the infrastructure gets on the ground, that we will have a bike share, some kind of a bike share program lined up that can land at the same time. So if we were here today to approve a bike share program or a bike share system, I would be saying no, because for that very reason. But we're not. That's not what's being asked of us. What's being asked of us is to ask administration to continue doing the work that is necessary to lay out what a bike share program could look like. Now, I don't agree with number 3 because it certainly limits the options. It limits what it possibly could look like. It limits the ability, I believe, it limits the ability of what a fully private system could look like. It limits the ability of what a not-for-profit bike share system could look like. So I don't think that we should be putting those limits on at this point. I think that we need to actually be able to look at everything. Bike share is part of our cycling strategy. We've approved the cycling strategy. It is a piece of it. I hope that committee will support moving forward with that. I will vote against number 3 just because I do think it limits what can be done too early and to too great a degree. I think it does. I think number 3 will and can potentially handcuff the private sector from actually participating in this. So I won't be supporting number 3, but I hope that the committee will support number 1 and 2. Closed.
Okay, thank you. Are you ready for the question, committee? Okay, so on number 1, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 2, Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
On recommendation 2, Alderman Carra.
No.
Alderman Demong.
No.
Alderman Farrell.
Yes.
Alderman Hodges.
No.
Alderman Jones.
Yes.
Alderman Keating.
Yes.
Alderman Lowe. Alderman Marr. Alderman Pincott. Alderman Colley-Urquhart. The motion is carried.
Call the roll, please, on number 3.
On recommendation number 3, Alderman Carra.
Yeah.
Alderman Demong.
Yes.
Alderman Farrell.
No.
Alderman Hodges. Alderman Jones. Alderman Keating.
Yes.
Alderman Lowe. Alderman Marr. Alderman Pincott. Alderman Colley-Urquhart.
Yes.
That's lost on a tie.
Thank you. Committee, that concludes this item. A motion to adjourn, Alderman Pincott. Thank you.
Thought someone would make the suggestion. If not, I move number 3 go to council. The lost motion will go to council. I have to say that to the city clerk within 24 hours.
Favor?
So I'm saying it now.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.